goals when we started really developing the characters was that we wanted these to feel like real people. They weren't just going to be stereotypes.
We detail out who our characters are, what we think they would sound like, and then we sort of go out and choose the sound of our actors. We maybe test like 120, 150 different actors.
Mostly guys who grew up in New York or lived in New York for a set amount of time. You kind of have to know the lingo. It's its own language. You can't really imitate it or you end up sounding like, you know, Fat Tony on The Simpsons.
One of the decisions we took real early on in the project was to not use famous actors. We really have a problem with the fact that you can't relate to that as the player character so much.
It's, oh, that's so-and-so, that's not the character. You know, he's voicing the character, but I'm thinking about the actor, not thinking about the character on the screen.
How about you get back in your cute little car with your little friends there and I'll pretend I never seen you. Sound good?
Something we did for Mafia II that a lot of games don't do is that we brought all the actors together and we did 5 or 6 guys at a time on an ADR stage actually playing off one another.
Having these guys just banter with one another, you really get that higher level of performance that we really needed and really wanted to achieve with Mafia.
As well as making the characters sound genuine, we also had to make them act like real mobsters, and we were able to do this with motion capture.
Máme k dispozici motion.
We bought our very own mocap studio for Mafia 2 so that we could capture or tweak any animation whenever we needed to. The challenging part, however, was to get all these movements and combinations to run within the memory limitations of a console and still have a fun playable game. Another thing that we insisted on with the mocap sessions was that the actors used real weapons as props. Real weapons equals realistic animations. So we ordered real firearms such as the classic Tommy gun, the MG42 and various pistols, and you can really see that in the movement of the characters.
Something else that makes the world really feel alive is the radio. For a great deal of time in the game, you're going to be in the car, so we have multiple radio stations in the game. Each has its own DJ.
To je na tomto zajímavé, že
We worked really hard on the DJ scripts to get them just right and to set the scene for the 1940s and 1950s. The DJs talk about period news and world events such as World War II, and they perform charming old-fashioned style commercials. The DJs really help to create an authentic atmosphere.
And they all play different type of music, and I think we spent about 4 years working on the soundtrack at this point.
Empire Bay's news hub.
vedle hudby v rádiu.
Besides the music on the radio, Mafia 2 also uses a lot of cinematic score that we composed here in the 2K Czech studio. The game contains many Hollywood-like elements, so we naturally needed music to support this.
V podstate sa skomponovalo viac ako 180 minút hudby.
In total, we composed over 3 hours of original music using electronic samples and computer programs. But we knew that to convey the right emotions, we needed to re-record it with live musicians.
Even though we're dealing with guys that maybe have got, like, you know, involved in shady kind of deals and whatever else, we still see the human side of them. The feeling of engagement with the characters in Mafia is, you know, is really second to none.
Like most mob stories, it's a rags to riches story. Here's where you are, here's where you want to be, and here's what you have to do to get there.
When the player first picks up the controller, they're fully immersed. And that's really something we've spent a lot of time doing. Our technology is a big sort of driver of this, you know, allowing players to feel like they're sort of taking part in a movie experience.
We've built all the technology from the ground up to be exactly as we need it. Being it the AI system or streaming system, things which enable us to make the city alive exactly as we envision it. The fact that we built our own illusion engine enabled us to execute exactly what we wanted to happen in the game.
Všechno musí fungovat dohromady, to znamená...
Using the Illusion engine, we were able to create a real living city. This is not a sci-fi game, so players know how everyday objects should react. It was much more demanding to get these things right so that players believe and trust in the game world.
Co se týká...
The non-playable characters go a long way to making Empire Bay feel believable. We have a very elaborate system that allows them to behave normally in the city. For example, waiting at traffic signals before crossing the road.
It shows that our game is not only good fun, but also that there is attention to detail.
Every bullet you shoot, it has some impact. It can destroy a piece of the environment, it can injure the characters.
A dobré na tom je, že...
The physics engine has a big part to play in this. Whenever a player destroys an object, it can cause a chain reaction of destruction. For example, shooting the gas tank of a car can cause it to explode, killing the enemies around it.
Právě díky tomu, že...
Because of the sheer number of destructive possibilities, we needed the lighting to be dynamic. Our illusion engine is perfect for this. It can display lots of different light, cast realistic shadows, and it reacts to the real-time events happening around the player.
Podstatná část Mafie jsou.
In order to link this world with the gameplay and the great story, we needed to create cutscenes that were like short films. It's a very important thing for Mafia, the fact that the game looks like a movie.
With a huge story in a living city with all these characters, you need to see what Vito's thinking, what he's doing. You need to see what other characters are doing. You need to see what's going on down the street, maybe.
In order to create the cutscenes, we built our own cutting editor and engine. This enabled us to play the cutscenes in-game and in real time. It wasn't easy, but now we can animate anything we have in the game. This allows us to forget about the technology and concentrate on making movies.
Don't worry about the kid. Small price to pay. Small price? That's my f***ing friend you're talking about.
All of us at 2K, we're all really immersed in the world of Mafia. We all love these movies, you know, The Sopranos, Goodfellas, Godfather.
Movies that portrayed the real mobsters as real people. I grew up with guys like this, so I looked at the story and I was like, okay, this guy is like, you know, this guy I grew up with, this guy's like another guy I grew up with, and then I just, you know, add a little more character into the characters.
We spent a big part of our lives on this game, but I very much believe it made a difference, and people will feel the love that we put in.
While there was a big focus on story and the cutscenes and the dialogue and the characters, we never forgot that this, first and foremost, is a game gamers want to play.
One day my father decided it was time to move away, across the ocean, to start a new life in Empire Bay. Never in my life had I seen anything as fantastic. It was beautiful.
Empire Bay is a fictional city. It's on the east coast of America. It's inspired largely by New York. You would probably recognize the skyline, but it's really a cross-section of lots of different American cities.
Cost Empire Bay.
Empire Bay covers an area of around 10 square miles, which is roughly twice the size of the city in the original Mafia.
We have many different neighborhoods in the city, some 20 different neighborhoods. It really sort of feels real, you know. It feels like an American city that everyone's been to, but obviously it's period authentic as well, and it's a big part of the details that we've added to the game.
A samozřejmě byli jsme taky.
These little details were so important to us when we were creating the city. We wanted the buildings to have the correct wireframe models and the textures to be as authentic as possible. So we actually went to New York and Chicago and spent several weeks soaking up the atmosphere and taking thousands of photos to use as inspiration.
We have two versions of the city. We've got a 1940s version and a 1950s version. So the first part of the game is set in the winter, you know, like the whole place is completely covered in snow. It's happening during World War II, so the whole atmosphere is one of, you know, austerity. Everyone is very poor. A lot of the young guys have been away to war. In fact, the game begins with Vito coming back from the war.
And just like in our game, life is tough for Vito. Life is not easy for Vito.
Can't believe you just got me out of the service.
Come see me tomorrow. We got a lot to talk about.
For me, it's the very small details. You know, like the snow sliding off the cars when you accelerate. The period detail is extremely high. All of these things together, the animations, the detail, the weather changing as you go through the missions, it's really just all adds together to create the atmosphere and the vibe. Then we move to the 50s, it's a very different environment, it's rock and roll, the guys are driving cool cars, everyone's got a little bit more money, the whole kind of feeling and the vibe of the game have changed.
The 50s for us really is the birth of cool, you know? The birth of the TV, the birth of rock and roll. It's got all these different sort of things going for it, you know, after the depression of the 40s and the war. When you sort of come to the 50s in the game, it really feels different, you know? It's really bright, it's really vibrant, there's loads of different stuff going on in the city.
The music in the game really transports you back to the era. We have almost 200 licensed tracks that were on the radio back then. This is all real music from the era. You know, it's artists like Little Richard, Tony Bennett, classic artists that, you know, the music is still alive and well today.
Hey, how'd you get in here?
The enemies in the game are different sorts of gangs from within the city. You have the bombers, the greasers. But as well as that, we have other Italian mobsters from the Clemente family, from the Vinci family, and the Falcone family. I guess a big enemy could be described as the police force. The feds and the police are always trying to put a stop to the mafia's crimes that are going on.
It depends on which police you're talking about. If it's the beat cop, are you going to screw with these guys who really aren't committing a violent crime right in front of you? You're just going to take your payoff and keep on walking because it's a lot easier.
What we wanted with the police is a sort of very 50s film sort of feel to it, you know. If you duck out of sight, duck down a few alleys, then you're going to lose the immediate chase.
Everything just feels different. The way they speak is different, the music is different. All these different elements, they really transport you back. It doesn't feel like oh, I'm gonna go to Manhattan now and walk around. Expect to see the same kind of thing. It's a different world.
Mafia II is it's a third-person action-adventure game set in a fictional city in the east coast of America during the 40s and 50s. It charts this guy, Vito Scaletta's sort of rise into a life of organised crime along with his buddy Joe.
Well, like every classic mob story, Mafia II is a story about friendship, betrayal. The guys who you think are the bad guys might not really be the bad guys. Your best friend might be the bad guy.
The thing that's really important to us is this sort of cinematic storytelling that the guys here at 2K Czech can sort of achieve. Something we're really proud of, something we've invested so much time and effort into making sure it's perfect.
A na tom vlastně stavíme.
We want to present the whole game in a Hollywood film-like style, and visually it looks amazing, but it's the story that's the most important thing for us.
It starts off with, it's just about Vito, and then the first guy you meet is Joe. He's Vito's best friend, and then you'll meet Vito's mother and sister right away.
Vito, my boy. My boy's home.
Vito's a nice guy. He has strong morals. He doesn't kill people because he wants to. He kills because he has to.
He just wants to get a bit of money, a bit of respect, and a bit of power. Vito doesn't aspire to be the Don.
Here's your 300 bananas. I'm taking my cut as the middleman. Next time, you're on your own.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
When I first got the first version of the script, one thing that really stuck out was that it was a buddy story. It wasn't just one guy on his own doing what he wants.
Like I said, I know people. You get all the official paperwork tomorrow.
Joe's sort of a shoot first, sort of ask questions later sort of guy, you know?
Joe is the guy who comes up with the schemes and or tries to come up with the schemes, and Vito kind of makes sure that they both don't get arrested or killed.
Joe just makes some pretty dumb decisions through the story, you know, and Vito is just left to sort of like deal with that and sort of get Joe, his best buddy, out of these scrapes.
Don't worry, I thought of everything. I got these phone company uniforms so we can pretend to be fixing something.
Sounds a little too simple.
Our goal was to build the relationship in such a way that it's clear to us, or to the player, that Joe is his best friend. Something like family, if not even more.
We'll find you a job where you can make good money without killing yourself, all right?
Music to my ears.
Besides Joe Barbaro, there's a lot of other characters that Vito meets and interacts with and becomes friends with throughout the story. The first real mob guy you meet is a guy named Henry Tomasino, who gives you kind of your first big break. And then this guy named Eddie Scarpa, who's kind of similar to Joe in that he likes the booze, he likes the women.
It's an open world city with a very strong linear story travelling through it, which is maybe a little bit of a different structure than we see with other open world games.
With our game, the story is incredible, the dialogue is amazing.
If you knew what was really going on, you'd realize that you was better off in jail. But that don't matter now anyway.
What we wanted to chart was this guy's rise through the ranks of the Mafia.
The Mafia is pulling the strings. If you're ordered to do something, you have to do it, even if you don't agree. Otherwise, you won't survive, or you might lose a friend, or even your family.
You're gonna do us all a favor, and if I refuse, you die.
The life of a mobster isn't what it's all made out to be, you know. It's not all really glamorous, you know. It has some really bad things that happen to it, and we really explore that during the story. I think it's really interesting. People are going to really enjoy it. At its core, Mafia II is a third-person action crime game. It has all the exciting car chases, all the gunfights, and all the melee combat that you'd expect from a game like this.
Our target kind of experience was very much things like Goodfellas, Godfather, very kind of adult movies with very serious themes. And for that to happen, we needed the game world to be realistic.
Shooting is one of the most important things in the game, and obviously, as we try to be realistic, our weapons are quite lethal.
We really wanted to feel like deadly combat. What we don't want is the player sort of rushing enemies and doing things like that, you know. You can only take 2 or 3 shots before you actually die. If someone shoots at you, the first instinct is to get behind some cover. It really feeds into that intense feeling that we really want from the gun combat experience.
We spent a lot of time and effort on the cover system because the player will spend a lot of time using it. But you have to be careful because the cover can often be easily destroyed. So if you're hiding behind a fence and it starts to disintegrate, it's time to move elsewhere. This destructibility was a big thing for us. We wanted to fill the whole city with a massive number of destructible objects, so the player felt that they could pretty much destroy anything. The player can use a wide range of weapons, from pistols to submachine guns. Of course, we had to include the classic Tommy gun that everyone knows from the Mafia movies.
We do massive explosions from different stuff, like vehicles can be exploded. With some Molotov cocktails, they'll sort of set fire to the gasoline as it falls on the floor. And all these different things are things that you'd sort of expect from the 40s and 50s weaponry. Melee combat in the game is a really sort of visceral experience. We want it to feel really brutal. So it's a very simple system. Using 2 buttons, you perform these either hard punches or light punches. And then using a combination of these, you perform these finishing moves. And the coolest thing is these finishing moves are sort of context sensitive as to where you are in the world. So if you're stood near the hood of a car, then the player might punch a guy and then sort of smash his head against the hood of the car, which is a really cool thing.
The driving model is very realistic. So you drive these things, they really feel like period cars. They feel very heavy, they feel really satisfying when you're driving them around. Once you get familiar with the controls, there's a real skill to doing the handbrake turns, the donuts and the skids in the street. The inspiration for these has been the cars and the car chases that you see in gangster movies. So if you visualize a gangster movie chase, you know, the cars screeching around the corner with the smoke coming off the tires, guys shooting out of the windows with Tommy guns, this is very much one of the key goals for the driving experience. We've got like a few features in the game which allow the player to sort of like personalize their vehicle. In the body shops you can customize the car a fair deal. You choose the car that you like the best. You know, I'm going to choose to take this car on the mission because it's better than every other car in the city. I think that's a pretty cool decision to make.
Our gameplay is great. We've got shooting, car chasing, everything a game needs, but we also need to link it to the story to create a believable game.
We needed to move away from some of the more arcadey conventions that you see in other open world games and focus more on a realistic experience for the player, so the player behaves like a mafia gangster.